I hope you all don't mind my calling it IPSY, but that's what I call it.
We do too.
It's always IPSY. Public Library and the Museum, African American History and Cultural, Historic,
African Culture and Historical Museum.
African American Cultural
And Historical
and
Museum
Historical Museum
of Washington County.
of Washington County.
It's long.
You should get that right. That's right. I'm glad I got it right.
Okay.
Thank you for co-sponsoring this. I've had a little bit to do with the Historical Society. Ypsilanti? Or is that of Washington County? Okay, Ypsilanti before. The last time I was there, I walked around a corner in one of the rooms, just kind of looking, and there was my daddy. I was like shook. There he was. I think that was my last visit. So I'm really honored that you would ask me. I was first told that I could do 10 minutes, and I thought that was fine, and I could manage that. And then I was invited to do 45. The only time I want to hear anybody talk for 45 minutes is if I take a class. And at 75, I don't want any more classes. So I promise you this will probably be about written for 15, and maybe I'll stretch it out to 20, but I don't want it to be long because I would like to hear from you afterward. Questions, comments. I know that some of you knew my daddy and mama, some of you knew me, and my children. I do want to recognize that my son left at 5 this morning from Chicago to go to a new job in California. But my daughter is here with me. And this is Tiffany Orange, who is taping me right as we speak. And she is with Ford Motor Company. And at my father's funeral, she got up to read the 23rd Psalm. And she said, "My name is Tiffany Denise Orange, and no matter what my grandfather told you, I am not the president of Ford Motor Company." So she sort of hangs with me. And so she even took me out a few minutes ago just to breathe in the bathroom. So she takes care of me. Okay. So what can I tell you about my father and his connections to Ypsilanti and Washington County that many of you already know? I see Brown Chapel here. Where are you, Brown Chapel? Okay, all right. And neighbors and friends, some of whom I may remember, a lot of whom I may not. I even had one lady come in and she said, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you again." And I said, "Tell me who you are." Because I haven't been here in a long time. But I do remember that whenever we came, we were received with love. My children were received with love. My family was always received with love. So I really appreciate your coming today. So I'm going to claim 75 as an excuse, but I have to tell you that Albert P. Marshall, even at 86, days before he died, remembered everyone's face, remembered everyone's name, and remembered every story. He was all about others, who they were, and very opinionated about all of it. So he would give you his opinion about who they were, or what they said, or where they were in life. He was very opinionated. That's just who he was all his life. You may not know that this nerdy young man was always about what was also happening around him and taking responsibility seriously. So here come the stories. As the oldest of 3, growing up expressly poor in outer Muskogee, Oklahoma, Albert watched over his siblings in support of his widowed mother, who worked full-time in the home of a white family. Surely there were long days, and probably often overnights. But he was responsible for taking care of his little brother and sister, helping with the family's small income and life provisions, with a little farming on the side. Now, my children remember my father talking about Cherry, the family's calf. I remember Cherry being a cow. But I will tell you that even though I can't remember a single story about that calf or cow, whichever one it was, I can't tell you any of those stories because my father brought them up all the time. He would always bring up Cherry, and there would always be some story about that calf or that cow. And it would be, I don't know, and my children would love to hear about it, but they couldn't tell me any of those stories either. So, but anyway, Daddy always included them. But it was here in Muskogee, Oklahoma, perhaps in the early 1920s, where he learned something that impacted the rest of his life in that deep South Oklahoma City, below the historic Mason-Dixon line. This 10-year-old learned a lot. His mother surprised the children early one Christmas morning by taking them to work with her. And it was here that he started gleaning something about people, that some white people, at least those in his life, demonstrated or could demonstrate compassion and maybe even a little integrity. As both families gathered around this enormous Christmas tree, the family's children were anxious to hear their names called. And one name was called by Santa to receive a gift, and it was Albert, the little black boy who was the son of Mary, the housekeeper. Daddy never forgot that morning. He talked about it to me a lot. Or the feeling that he had of just being the first to remember in that situation. And thereafter, he moved pretty easily, even in the worst of times, between ethnic groups, whether people were white or whether they were Native American or whatever they were, from around the world, whether he was being supervised by them, or whether he was the one who was supervising them, or being attacked by them, or advocating for them. He tried to find a smart way to deal with them. And he never found hate in his heart for them, because he didn't think that hate was a smart way to operate. It was not a smart option towards getting things done and in moving life forward. And I don't think Daddy ever did use hate in that way. Mary Bland Marshall moved her family to Kansas City, Missouri in the late 1920s, and Daddy spent his high school freshman lunch hours in the library, since he didn't have any lunch money. And the school librarian noticed him and started sharing her lunch with him. And then she started bringing a lunch for him. And then eventually she hired him to work in the library during his lunch hours. And then, if that wasn't enough, she gathered funds with friends to sponsor his first year in college at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. And that is where he met Ruth Langley Marshall. They married after college and moved to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where he served as librarian at Winston-Salem State Teachers College before serving 4 years in the United States Coast Guard. And returning to their alma mater after graduate school in 1950, which is where I grew up, my parents thrived under the watchful eyes of their former professors. He prescribed in that job a lot of progressive ideas about academic leadership in that historically black college, university. And he had his own resist movement, which was very visible on campus with the different things that he did. But it was also very noticeable in church, in his local Missouri, in a lot of community ways. And of course, he brought some of that resist movement when he came here. He was also very, very dedicated to doing a lot of things in his profession, and he had that personal mission throughout that time in Missouri especially, of advocating for those whose voices might not be heard, no matter how it looked to others. And he had that until he died. That thought process, he was comfortable with white colleagues. That caused him some unpopularity with a lot of his black colleagues. Surely some friends and probably others as well. But that giving all those a chance to prove themselves proved him popular among students of every nationality. He learned that you got more if you were open to more. And one example is one of the first computers in the academic library in the state of Missouri in the 1950s took up a whole first floor city conference room at Lincoln University's Inman E. Page Library. Now, you know computers, man, that's what they did. They were huge. And required a budget financing for 24-hour cooling. And I remember that. I remember it was always cold over there. I was never allowed in the room, but I could peek in at that big thing. And when you went around that corner, it was always cold. Now, how did Lincoln get that opportunity? Daddy met the computer salesman at a national conference, won that contract, and the company's willing to put the expense. He recognized the possibilities and the benefits for Lincoln students, black students, having heard about the importance of the new computers at national conferences. He always had his eyes and ears open for opportunities that were going to help those folks that he was dedicated to help. You may remember that here he was active in Rotary International. He became the district president of Rotary, of your district in Rotary, the first African American to do so in this district. And yet that certainly was not the first of his firsts. At his funeral, Brown Chapel members here, although there are only 2, may remember that 5, count them, 5 Rotary International district presidents spoke of his generosity, his advocacy, his good works in this and other communities, especially on behalf of third world countries. And then 3 men in uniform stood up. I remember that. I was like, who are these people? Were there and shared Daddy's service as an Ypsilanti Fire Department commissioner, where he was able to oversee the transition to an integrated force. Resisting. Did you know that? Resisting. But he had done his homework. He knew his history, learned a lot of it here, especially your black history. And he used it to the advantage of those who needed it, as some of you may remember. And he continued to learn about the communities when he lived in Jefferson City, where he was the first black president of the Missouri Library Association. He was on the Jefferson City Boy Scouts Council, which integrated its troops while he was there. And he updated the history of the university's founding twice. And still he found time to take his family to Quinn Chapel AME Church, where I grew up, where I can still hear my mama's high soprano voice in the senior choir, and Daddy was the superintendent of Sunday school. As president of the Missouri State NAACP, resisting, he took his family, us, into Missouri racist Boot Hill, where the Klan was king, to strategize with those folks. Took us there. We had to leave the highway, turn out the lights, to travel to a house where a meeting was being held and the shades were down. And then when we walked in, the lights would go on. That's where I did my homework. And then when we were ready to go, the lights would turn out. We would get in our car, no lights on the car, drive back to the highway, and then drive home. Then in 1969, he and Mama moved to Ypsilanti. Now, he told me he moved to Ypsilanti to be closer to his one child who had married and gone to Milwaukee. But actually, he really came to be the director of libraries, the dean of academic services at Eastern, from 1969 to 1980. And for those 11 years at Eastern, he modernized some practices and tried to be a role model, was. He prioritized information access to students. Now, he told me that. That's what he told me. And he believed that the library flourished under his leadership. He told me that too. Yet he maintained a professional ethic that was recognized in award after award for many years. I was amazed at the recognition that he got. I remember one Ypsilanti story that later confirmed its truth about his being confronted by an EMU library staff person for passing over her for promotion. He reportedly told her that the position was too small a step in her career and advised her to seek employment for a higher position. Can you imagine? Elsewhere. And she's the one who told me the story. He didn't even tell me that story. She was the director of a large urban public library, which she just recently retired from, and has been recognized as the Librarian of the Year by National Library Association Division. She was grateful for the nudge, she said, but again celebrated that he was who he was. She was a white woman, and it mattered to her that he would do that for her. But he did that for everyone. And I didn't know that he was doing all those things. But he was that way with me too, and with us. Opinionated, pushy, teasing, honest, sometimes making me upset when I wasn't excelling as well as he thought I could or should do, yet loving me still. And I know he was that way with you if you knew him, and if you didn't, you probably should have, because he would have had you probably further on than where you were. And upon his death, I heard so many stories from so many people that I did not know. People here, it was on our library news, and there were just so many comments. I was really surprised and humbled. Young and older people who he had met through his career, people he had advised, people he had coached. He referred people to higher positions, memories of his generosity and his intervention and advocacy from people from all different ethnic groups and other underrepresented groups too. Albert P. Marshall was active in leadership with the American Library Association all of his professional life. All of it. He remembers when he first got out of college and got his library degree, before he and my mama married, he went to a conference that was in Cincinnati. I don't like Cincinnati to this day because of that. He went to this meeting, and there were only 5 Black librarians, all men, and they could attend any meeting, but they could not attend any meal meetings where there were banquets or where meals were being served, and they could not use the regular elevator, so they had to use the freight elevator. And again, here he got support of that movement that he was on, of really accepting people who they were. He was leaving one of those meetings, this isn't in the script. He was leaving one of those meetings, and somebody in the meeting said, "Come on, are you going to that meeting?" Blah, blah, blah. And Daddy said, "Yes." And Daddy, of course, was going toward the stairs. He said, "Oh, come on, AP, come on and take the elevator with me." So Daddy looked at him and he said, "Come on and take the elevator with me." So Daddy gets on the elevator with him, and they go up one floor, and the man gets ready to get on the elevator, and he calls him, "What are you doing on the elevator? You know you can't ride the elevator, blah, blah, blah." And the man who was with him said, "We are going to the 3rd floor. Are you going too?" And the elevator closed. And again, that just showed Daddy that everybody, you had to be fair, you had to be honest, that everybody did not have to be hateful. He was always writing, Lord have mercy. The man I wrote an article once for ALA that talked about his writing on 3x5 cards. He had 3x5 cards in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in his pockets, in the file cabinets. I have to tell you, up until a couple of years ago, and he died in 2001, up until a couple of years ago, I could open up a box of his and there would be a 3x5 card. And it would have, bibliographic information on it, or it might have a quote from something that he heard that he thought was important, and he could have done it in church. He was always writing. publishing, speaking, teaching, initiating, and always challenging the status quo. He chaired numerous meetings and councils and commissions, many of whom championed integration and equity of access, as well as focusing on integrity and academic professionalism for all, including but not only people of color. He collaborated with librarians, including the Black Caucus of the American Library Association, confronting the National Library Association in addressing discriminatory practices and policies similar to what I just mentioned at its national meetings, as well as discriminating with library services in local communities. And so you know that when I got a job at the American Library Association, you know he wrote about that too. He wrote an article, I think it was in the Courier, actually. I'm not sure, Sarah, but I think it was in the Courier. Of course, he sent it to me, and it was an article that, and I didn't realize that I had really been addressing the same thing. I didn't even realize that until I read a recent resolution that the American Library Association listed all these things, and I realized that over the 12 years that I was at ALA, I was sort of following in his footsteps without really knowing it. So as you see, race can be seen as an integral focus of much of what he did, usually as a change maker, as a thought provoker, as a conversation starter, questioning, documenting, quoting literature and history truths to us all, loving people. He was on the radio right up until he could not speak. He was on the radio every Monday. I can't think of the show that the Ypsilanti show that he was on. And it was weeks before he died, and he was sitting in a chair. He couldn't even go to the radio station. And at one point, he was so heavily medicated that the man said, AP? And I was in the kitchen, and I realized that my father had nodded off. But then I shook him, and he said, yes, what was your question? And then, of course, he had an opinion about that. He was always on the radio, always in the newspaper, in the pulpit, informing, confirming, celebrating history, Ypsilanti history, and African American history here. And here in Ypsilanti, he jumped right in and started learning and loving this new community. He loved Brown Chapel AME Church, where he became a deacon, historian, and a right-hand man for more than one pastor. He authored the history of that church a couple of times. And in Ypsilanti, he was celebrated here a few times as a scholar in Ypsilanti and Washtenaw County history. And he and Mama fell in love with their new home, and so she went back to school to the University of Michigan, and she got her library science degree. So we had 3 librarians in our family. She instantly became an active community member in her own right, with her beloved Delta Sigma Theta sorority, the Samson Brooks Missionary Society at Brown Chapel, the Vogettes, Altrusa, and of course the historic Palm Leaf Club. Now, if you've not heard of these, then you need to go to the Ypsilanti Historical Society, and they will have information about these. Am I right, Greg? Right. She volunteered at Bayer Hospital and retired as the first director of the Washtenaw County Library for the Blind and Visually Handicapped. Okay, and there's another story. Is that okay? When we surprised her, I brought my children, and we surprised her at the retirement party for her at the Washtenaw County Library for the Blind and Visually Handicapped. And her job was to select books, and then she had someone who would take them out on the little bookmobile to all these people who were blind or visually handicapped, most of whom never went to the library. They got their books when they were delivered to them. But, they all came. People came. They had their children bring them. They were in wheelchairs and, canes and walkers like mine. They were, all coming to say goodbye to Ruth. And so a woman walked in, and she was, a little disabled, and she walked in, and she was, looking, and And so Mama was at the door, and Mama didn't know who she was. And she walked right past Mama, and she said, Ruth? Ruth? And Mama was behind her back then, and she said, yes. And she turned around, and her eyes just got really big when she saw that this black woman that she had been dealing with all this time had been providing her these services that she had really enjoyed. So that was a wonderful story that my mother told me. But I must include that one of her prides would be this library. She was so proud of leadership in the campaign for this library. That was one of the last things that she did. And so she would love this place. I got a tour. If you haven't been here before, get a tour before you leave because it's wonderful. Who'd know that I would be speaking here today? Daddy also learned about Ypsilanti and its history by taking her everywhere because she didn't drive. Never did, thank goodness. Well, I have to tell you, when I was a little girl, Daddy gave her a driver's lesson, and I was in the back seat, and I asked to be allowed to get out. And after that, I think she was so embarrassed that she never tried again. But anyway, he wrote about all those things, and again, in his column in the Courier, he would write that he had taken her here, and they had gone here, and he would be really proud that she was active. But then he learned a lot from those trips with her. And then Daddy sat on Ypsilanti mayors and Michigan governors committees for various community interests and soon became enthralled with the folks he and my mother were meeting and with whom they were knowing as friends and colleagues. And you'll hear about some of those hear them in a lot of those interviews that we're celebrating today. I'm thinking of George Goodman, who was a neighbor, and his best friends, the babies. That's a really good one to listen to. Your Ypsilanti became a landing place for my family too, for holidays and summer weekends, as Joyce mentioned, anniversary celebrations, and of course, illness recovery visits. You were always welcoming to us, and so our children came to love Ypsilanti as well, and I thank you so much for that. My parents loved their grandchildren, one on his way back to California now, and one who is with me here today. I thank you so much for loving us. And so the final gift to my father and to my mama and to this community is its rich and noble history, including but not limited to the African Americans who also have contributed so much to it. Embedded in his conversations with you, Ypsilanti citizens who became his friends, he would hear your stories of your family's presence in the founding and the growth of Ypsilanti. Look, it's just so much bigger and better than it was when I last saw it. And all of its surroundings, which is why we're here today, to celebrate these stories, your stories. AP and Ruth Marshall would be humbled, and so are we. Thank you.